All right. Welcome, everybody, to pyRevit Hackers Podcast number 2. And today I have a very special guest for pyRevit community. I think pyRevit wouldn't be where it is without him. And that's exactly why I also like to call him pyRevit Uncle. But you might know him as Jean-Marc Couffin. And welcome to the show, man. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing fine, doing fine. And just for the record, my name, Couffin.
Couffin. Sorry, I should have practiced better.
Yeah, that's fine.
So we have quite a lot to talk about, but first of all, I want to probably address the elephant in the room. Last week, you and the team have released the pyRevit 4 5.0, and could you share with us what's new, what's the biggest changes, and why should people go and install it right away?
Okay, so for the pyRevit 5, the biggest piece here was to actually make it compatible with Revit 2025 because the API of Revit changed quite extensively. They changed the framework. That doesn't talk to everybody when we talk about the .NET framework, but basically it's just changing the engine that is running behind Revit and its API, and we had to adapt to it. And so the change was made by Olshaf. Dozimep, if you see him in the community, is quite active. And we got some help also from Andrea Sanzo to make it work. So it was ready already 6 months ago, actually. And we didn't release it because we wanted to go all the way in, meaning fixing all the stuff that didn't work. So we didn't go through everything. We did fix quite a few things that you won't necessarily notice, except for sometimes the time for loading is a bit better. But we wanted to really improve the way pyRevit is parsing or fetching or getting all the buttons and making them into the UI. So that's one thing that we really want to improve, and that's going to be probably more like a pyRevit 5, I guess, or 6, sorry, or 5.5. So that's something we want to recode actually this part, because this part is being done in Python and it's quite slow up to a point. And now we want to make it in C#. So it won't change anything for the life of everybody using pyRevit every day, except for the time for loading in when Revit is launching the first time. So that was the main change, like really a big one. And that's still one of the main playground that we want to have for the next year or so. Right now, we are still designing a plan for the development. Uh, when I say we, it's just basically 3 people most of the time, and not everybody has the time to work at the same time. So it doesn't. It goes pretty slow.
But you all do it in kind of part time, right?
Yeah, I mean that's for fun. I'm doing that for fun. I wish I could do that and get a job out of it, but I can't. But no, that's on my spare time.
I think many people don't realize that pyRevit is pretty much just developed by the community in spare time.
Yeah,
Some people think that that's a big company or something, but no, this is just a few people who are excited about Python, Revit, and they decided, hey, let's make it happen and maintain it. You kind of took the role of managing pyRevit, kind of pushing it forward, organizing stuff. Could you just share a little bit about this?
so Ehsan is the daddy here, and I'm the sidekick. So Ehsan did develop pyRevit 10 years ago, so that's the 10th anniversary. I mean, it was probably last 6 months. In the past 6 months, it was the 10th anniversary. And for like 6 years, he managed to do it on the side. And at one point, he was caught up in a new job with the people at Rhino and Grasshopper, and he's been developing since Rhino inside Revit. So at one point, I was already a bit involved with him, saying that I was chatting with him and asking about how to do this, to do that, to fix this, to fix that. So I tried to dabble a bit in Python and fix some of the code and tools and all that. And at one point, I told him, well, that would be good to have a forum or a place where we could chat and get people to interact a bit more than through issues, because issues in GitHub is a cool place to record things, but not really to chat about stuff. So at this point, we discussed a bit and decided to make the discourse. He did it, actually, the discourse forum. And then at this point, I got more and more involved trying to answer questions because I knew the background of pyRevit quite extensively, so I could answer quickly to people. And that's what got me more and more involved and more looking into the code base and trying to understand the monster, because the pyRevit is really a big piece of software. It's not the typical small open source thing that you could find. It's really a big monster.
And how long ago was it when you started getting involved? And
Probably like 5 years ago, I was really starting to get more and more involved. Um, And then from then on, Ehsan was more and more busy with his job, so I took over most of the things. So he helped me uh, remove everything that is under his name and put it under PyRevit Labs, and we shared like passwords and access and all the infrastructure. So
yeah, that was a big step.
he gave me the keys, basically. He gave me the keys and said, "Okay, go for it." And if somebody else wants to join, we can share the keys now. It was not possible before, but now it is.
No, I think it's a big step, especially now it's more like community driven. You kind of still organizing a lot of stuff, but more people can come in, come out. So you updated it to Revit 2025. And now, as you mentioned, the roadmap is just to make it more compatible, rewrite a lot of stuff in C Sharp. I saw that you already kind of got some offers for help from some people. Is there something you can you want to ask people
Yeah,
who want to kind of contribute somewhere, something?
I've been asking around actually to get some more help around, because C Sharp is not my playground. And even though we have two people like Dozimep and Sanzo knowing a bit more C Sharp than I do, it's still such a huge task that it's not something that we can just do on the side. So I was wondering if we could hire someone, because of the contribution of the community. We could probably hire someone for a couple of weeks to make most to concentrate on the work and make it happen. But it's still hard for me to figure out who's going to be the best candidate and how we can make it happen, because I ask around to the well-known people that know about the API, that know about how to structure .NET properly and neatly and all that. But most of these people are pretty busy most of the time. So, and the amount of money that we have to put in at the end of the task is not really enough, I would say, probably to get things done easily and nicely. So that's why I've been pushing a bit to get more and more contribution from not only the community but the company that employ the users, because that's where I mean, it's not the people using pyRevit themselves, because they're using it for the job. So
Yeah. I think the big companies benefit in the first place. They get access to all this library of the
yeah,
kind of
we,
plugins
we
and stuff.
got a bit of support. Asking for that, I mean, a bit, like a really tiny bit, but we still got a nice donation from Big, for example, at the end of last year. We got some other ones just now. I'm sorry, I forgot the names of the company, but we got a few coming. That's gonna help, but we still need to write down the plan precisely so that we can hire someone to do the job properly. And from then on, we hope that pyRevit is gonna be less buggy, because there are a few things that we know historically have been working, but are not like entirely neatly done.
Listen, I'm also going to leave a links under this video where people can support pyRevit if they decide to. Because I think that's really good thing that you do, that because you pretty much just take your spare time and decide to push this project. So that's really important. I think it's great if you can get some more help to do that.
You know, one thing that was interesting, and that's where when you're playing around in pyRevit and just fixing the code or enjoying the community and all that, you don't see the bigger picture sometimes. And one person from the community mentioned, I cannot go and ask my company for money because they would ask for something in return. And right now, that's why we want to set up a proper plan and have a bigger picture to offer, so that companies can say, okay, yeah, we want to go with that feature and make it happen, make it happen.
Hmm. They always want to see some return on investment so they can feel that they pay something, they get something. It kind of makes sense. Can you expand a little bit what is pyRevit for absolute beginners? I think my community should know what pyRevit is because that's all we talk about, but still, in just a few sentences.
Let me share my screen so that I show things around a bit this way.
Yeah, show, not tell. That's always the best.
Yes. I'm a trained architect, so I like pictures.
Yeah, we all do.
Basically, that's the GitHub page. That's where all happened in the past 10 years. Even though here you can even see that there are some commits from 5 years ago or everything. You get the whole history of the code. It's an open source Revit add-in. So that means you can read all the codes. There's nothing hidden. So if you're wondering if it's safe enough, you can run through the code and even do some external checks if you want to. We try to keep things tight, at least tight enough so that people can understand. So you get the first README page where it explains everything. And besides being a Revit add-in, which is basically you see sets of buttons all over the place in Revit with pyRevit under the tab here. That's what people think, see, and use most of the time. It's also a framework where you can use a Python engine to run some Python code. So framework being a set of modules, like bits and pieces that you can use to code faster, basically, to interact with Revit and with also some external softwares, tools, website, and everything. So you can go pretty deep down the hole. You can also use some C Python, but it's not fully supported yet. You can use some C Sharp compiled or not, some VBNet as well. I'm not sure. I haven't used it in many years, so I cannot really tell if it's usable today. You can also use some Dynamo script and some Grasshopper ones with a little bit of work, but it's doable. That was actually my entry into pyRevit. When I started using pyRevit just as a regular user, I saw all these buttons and this cool stuff, and I noticed that you could have you had the code behind every button accessible and all that. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And then I saw the mention of Dynamo, and I was, oh, that's cool because I have my huge quality control spaghetti plate running, and it's so slow and it's so tedious to open Dynamo every time to run it. So I started getting in through that. So I did my first button was actually my quality control push button where I could run all my tests on all my files.
Hmm. Interesting. I think that's how majority of people start. I also started the same way because many people they know pyRevit as just this kind of plugin that gives you a set of tools. Then later they found out, oh, there are actually additional
Yeah,
extensions.
once people get to understand, like you click on any of the button and do a shift click, I'm just going to take a simple one, like shift and click on this one, for example. It just opens up a window on the back, and then here you have a descriptive file that is the bundle.yaml, and then you get the Python file, and then you get the other codes, and that's it. And then even if you don't know the API, you can still try to read what you're having in front of you. And I mean, coding is English with a little complexity on top, but it's basically like reading English. So if you know how to read English, people are pretty scared at first, but once you tell them, no, it's just like English, just read it and then try to understand the words. Those are the words that you don't know yet, but once you know them, after that, you're good to go.
Yeah. It's just about if you can make logical step-by-step instruction and you understand a few rules how to write this plan, that's pretty much the coding. We solve problems with this code and that's it. But yeah, many people they always start like first of all they download the pyRevit, use the tools, they find additional extensions, and then it leads to this down the rabbit hole that oh they can look at all the code or they can read all the code. Today with AI it's even better and so on so on. They don't notice how they start making their own
I
tools.
mean, with AI these days, you don't have any barrier at the entry. You just go through and you're good to go in a few clicks. Uh, Another thing I wanted to mention is at first, whenever you wanted to install pyRevit, that was kind of tedious because people were scared about the GitHub and didn't understand the whole thing. They had to go in the release, and then after that, they could go through all the release available with the this is just a text to describe all the changes that happened in the latest release. And then at the end, they had the download links to download it. So pretty scary at first, but now we've done a website here that has just two buttons for you to download. So it's much easier. You can just download the latest release here or download the WIP installers, but you need a GitHub account to do this one. And then you have all the links to everything is centralized in this place now.
Yeah, much more beginner friendly.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's what pyRevit is all about. It's the easiest way to
Yeah, I mean,
create
you want a big
extension.
button, press it, no question asked, and go for it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I did this website last year to make it more centralized, and just this morning, just to show you, I did start from one of the community person like Thomas Vogt. He did start a community extension listing, and I said, okay, we should put it on the website instead. That would be nicer. So just did this morning. So it's not good looking yet, but at least you have all the extensions, like a pretty cool one. You have to.
Okay. Oh, there are more of them. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably 150, 200. That's last time I checked. That was.
Oh, I got it. So scour the GitHub.
Look for it actually. If you type in the search bar here and you look for, let's say, .panel folders, I think that's the way I did it last time. You can find it pretty easily. You still have to tidy it up a bit, like going with Python mostly and all that. But after that, after digging through that, you can find all the extensions.
I normally type pyRevit and I get a list of hundreds of them.
Yeah, but you're missing a few. Just 2 weeks ago, I noticed a new one from Herzog and de Meuron, and I didn't know they had this one, even though that was all public and everything. I just didn't type anything in the description, so that's why I couldn't.
Okay, I see. Yeah, there are so many examples. This is also why it's so easy to get in, because you can find all these examples, take the code, and then just change a little bit to you, like adjust to your company needs, and that's how we pretty much all start. Now, I also want to talk a little bit about you, about pyRevit, Uncle. You already mentioned your journey, how you got involved with pyRevit. But I want to talk a little bit about your career. I recently looked at your LinkedIn and I saw that you have 27 LinkedIn experiences, and I think across a couple decades.
Is it good?
No, I think it's good. You get us so much knowledge from all these different places, different countries. Could you just share about your career, when you started, and how did it go from there?
So I went to the architecture school in France, in Bretagne, in Rennes. That is the name of the city where I'm from. And I spent the first 2 years studying there. And on my second year, I met with some new friends at the time. And we started discussing, because one of the friends got a contact in Vietnam and all that. And he got a contact also with UNESCO. And we decided to, okay, let's try to find some side gig for the summer. So this summer, after the second year, I went to Vietnam. And that's where I left a piece of my heart. And so we did some rehabilitation stuff, like historical survey and everything over there. And we did travel quite a lot. And then when I came back, I was just different. That was not the same architecture student as you would expect. And then after my third year, I decided that I wanted to go in Erasmus somewhere. So I applied in Canada and I applied in Louisiana, and I got both options, but I decided to go to Louisiana in the US for a year. And I studied so many different stuff at the university that was so cool. Like I could pick any kind of lessons I wanted to. So I learned some sign language, some jewelry, some hands-on steel classes, some Spanish, some public speaking, all kind of stuff.
The education was still architecture, right? You just had all these options.
Yeah, the major was architecture, but as I was a foreign student, I got more flexibility in terms of my schedule. So I just jam packed my schedule with all this different stuff. So
Oh,
coming
that's
back
good.
from there, I wasn't ready to go back to France and study back architecture. So I went to Quebec to do some event design degree for a year. And I left a piece of my heart again in Quebec because that's a very nice country and with very friendly people and outstanding stuff that you can do there. And then coming back to France, my after my fourth year, uh, I just I met my wife actually. I met my wife at school, and then for 2 years I did study my fifth year and did my diploma, my thesis. For my last training, I needed to make a 6 months training program. So I did work for Woha Design, which is a very badass firm in Singapore. So I went back in Asia again and all that.
Okay, so you've been all over the place, so many
Yeah.
places.
I mean, during all my studies, I went all over the place, and and then I paid for it for 4 years, which was not that nice. But then for my first few years as an architect, I did work mostly in France and also a bit in Czech Republic because my wife is Czech, so that explains it. And then at some point, we decided to move to Canada because I still got some ties with Canada, and we were like on the move. She finished her degree. She's an architect too, so we went to Canada. I found a job in a great firm, Provencher-Roy, pretty nice firm, nice people, nice design and everything. And then I met with one of my best friend today, Frank Murat, badass beam specialist, if I put a name on or a title. He was so badass in Revit, and I was not bad, but I wasn't at his level. So I was his teammate, let's say, or right hand for a few years at Provencher. And then after that, I moved on with him, actually in a new firm, to do some BIM consulting. And then I moved out of Canada, and then we stayed in Czech Republic, and I've been working for Canada so far for like 12 years now.
So you still do this consulting, right?
Yeah, working with any kind of clients, like big institution, like fabrication company, architecture firm, engineers, like all the construction industry, pretty much.
No, interesting. So you get not only all these cultures and places, you also work across many different industries. So you get
Yeah.
a very good overview of what's going on in
I
this
mean, I'm not
industry.
doing my job as an architect today. I don't touch any kind of architecture except when I just do a critique with my wife on whatever she's designing. But that's it. And the rest of my time is spent mostly doing some change management, strategic thinking, and implementing or making some new tools whenever I can find a way to code something because that's what I like most.
Oh yeah, it's addictive.
Yeah, it is definitely.
And in this whole journey, where does Revit come in? Have you always studied with Revit, or was there like certain
No, I
like peer?
started I started with AutoCAD back in 99. Um, and then after 1 year of AutoCAD, I did learn ArchiCAD at school. That was pretty cool, actually. I mean, not everybody in the US or in Canada know ArchiCAD, but that's a badass program. And at least for the time when I started it, that was the only one that was on the market able to do some BIM, basically.
No, but that was like more than 20 years ago, right?
Yeah, yeah. And all plan was pretty much at the same level at the time. And then I learned Allplan, I learned Vectorworks, I learned what else? Anyway, 3ds Max, obviously, because at the time we needed to do some rendering for a week in 3ds plus V-Ray and everything. Like very painful process before Inkscape and the like. And then I started Revit in 2007 or 8, so quite a long time ago. And whenever Dynamo came out publicly, at least under Autodesk. I started with Dynamo when it was 0.6, I think, the version. Pretty
Oh yeah, so
messy, very
started with
messy.
everything in the early stages.
Yeah, yeah, I got lucky. I mean, I got really lucky. It's always like a friend of yours is telling you, "Oh, did you see that?" You just go and dig in, and then you're deep down the hole.
Everybody needs to first
Yeah.
kind of get introduced to something. Because at first, all these terms like Dynamo and all others, they don't make any sense until we can see actually someone using them.
And actually, that's a mindset. I mean, I wasn't in that mindset precisely. I was more a hands-on kind of guy, like always doing some stuff, drawing a lot, like making stuff. And then at some point, I met with one of my friends. Actually, that's David, probably that introduced me to that. But when I was in Louisiana, that's where I got like really aware of whenever I got an advice from someone about something, I would try it right away. And that friend, David Jobert, he introduced me to Photoshop. And at the time, I've used Photoshop a bit, but when I saw him using it with all the keyboard shortcut and all that, and I was like, okay, that's mastery. I need to learn that. And that's what got me really into things.
And then where does programming come into the picture? Have you always were interested in kind of how things work?
I've been always interested in computers so far. The first time I heard about something close to a computer was the Dictée Magique. That was a red box with a keyboard on it where you would spell words. That was just a game, but you could also program it a bit. So that was probably one of my first play with a computer-like machine. And then I I tried to get a computer, a proper computer, and that was a Thomson MO6. If you look on the internet for this, you'll see it
I will
has.
show the image on the screen
Yeah,
afterwards.
I can show it. Yeah, interesting computer, very interesting. Cartridge like a regular game control, a game console, and you got also the cassette thing where you could record your softwares on it. And whenever you wanted to play the software, you needed to press play physically on the computer. And you had no screen actually. You need to plug it on a TV, which was pretty cool actually. You got the Piritel connection, and you could. They had some pretty cool games. I remember a few of them, and they were interesting. To a point, obviously, because the screen was all blue and bluish.
This looks so ancient even to me. I look at this. I never seen those that where you have to actually put the cassette, run it with a button. This is like a console.
And then, oh yeah, that was cool. Also, I forgot about that. They got the optical pen that you could use on the TV to draw or point to something.
You
I,
already had a stylus back then.
I mean, that was a very nice piece of hardware. Very nice one.
Interesting.
So I learned basic on it.
Okay, so that
Anyways.
was your hello world statement.
Yeah, my hello word at the time, that was more like the turtle, using the turtle command. So that was a small pointer or icon of a turtle, and you could tell it to go up, down, left, right, and everything by how many pixels and all that. I mean, not that interesting to code, actually. Like very boring, and only not that many books, no access to internet. So you can imagine how
Oh
painful.
yeah, it was for me just interesting that I'm used to everybody starts with hello world. Now I hear something new like turtle. You control the cursor.
I mean, it's like whenever I tell my kids, go get a dictionary, and they look at me, and last time my third kid, like 8 years old, he asked me, but what is it? And then he said, no, I can look on the internet on my mom's cell phone and look for the words. But yeah, Wikipedia, and now I still have a few dictionary around, but we don't open it anymore, even though that was.
Yeah, it takes quite some time. All right, and when does programming come into your architectural career? Where
In my architectural career with AutoCAD, some Lisp mostly. but not
Mhm.
so much actually, because I was too busy studying and making models and drawings. I still, for my first 3 or 4 years, actually, I was still drawing by hand quite a lot. Like I would say 2/3 of the time that was by hand, and then a bit on computers. Even teachers were not used to it quite yet. I mean, that was all new for them. I mean, whenever I was bringing something like in ArchiCAD in 3D, and they were like, "Oh, that's cool. We're using AutoCAD."
Yeah, yeah, definitely different times. Even when I was studying like Revit was still a bit new around the world. I mean, it's still many people still use AutoCAD.
That's still new in many places, and I can understand why, because the license is so expensive. I mean, in Europe, you have firms that are like three, four, five people most of the time, and imagining paying like 3,000 euro a year for the software plus the expense of the machine that you need to run it
Yeah, definitely. I
compared
think
to
it's also you need a lot to get started with all the standards, templating, kind of figure out all
yeah,
this
yeah.
framework to
I mean,
actually start.
the learning curve is very steep for Revit. Even compared to ArchiCAD, ArchiCAD is much faster to learn, and Vectorworks is even faster.
Never thought about that. I thought they all pretty much the same. How do you start?
Yeah, doing some consulting, I can tell you, like,
Hmm.
you need, I mean, some people are computer aware and some people are not. And whenever they're facing Revit and it's very, very neat buttons and everything, I mean, you're getting lost in that. You're getting lost pretty
Yeah,
easily.
there's a lot.
And if you're not using, if you just use it for consulting plans or making a section here and there, you won't, you'll get lost eventually. Yeah, that brings me to one topic. That's something that really have been bothering me using Revit all my career. Now, whenever I see products like, okay, hold on, let me find that. You probably seen iPar. I don't know if you tried it.
Oh, the cloud-based.
Yeah, cloud-based modeler planning, whatever.
Hmm.
So iPar is definitely the way forward for designer. It's so much simpler. There's no UI. And let me log in first. But
Yeah, I think there's so many softwares coming, like Hyper, like Acrol, many others. I think people just a little bit scared starting learning something new, not knowing if it's going to be obsolete in a year or if there's something like much shinier object
yeah,
kind of comes into play.
but Hyper have been around for many years now, actually more like 5 years probably officially. And the guy behind is the guy behind Dynamo at first. So that's Ian. Ian is behind this one. And there's also Anthony Oak. And all these people, they've been also working for Autodesk and all that. So they are pretty solid people, very smart people. I mean, they have a very strong team, actually, probably the strongest I know on the market. Let me just make a new project. I don't use it so much, but just the thing that here you cannot get lost with the UI because there's basically close to no UI. So you can just, you have all your tools, you place a space, and then once you select your space, you can stretch it properly the way you want and modify it. And it's so much simpler than every time clicking or having a keyboard shortcut for everything. And they also have some AI or generative design proposal for whenever they have the size of the room, they just extend it and then you can just go forward and create the inside of it. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's simpler, but it addresses only one step in the designing process, right? It doesn't do like the whole thing.
No, not really, not quite, because you can make templates for the type of rooms. So let's say you're making schools.
No, I mean more like Revit. In comparison to Revit, this is like completely different stage of the project. Like you cannot go push it this far.
Yeah, but I mean, you can push it quite far in, I would say, up to schematic designs probably. But you can also push everything that is inside of it into Revit after that. So you already have everything in place and you can manage your program much more nicely than in Revit, except by doing like some weird stuff or using some code book things or very expensive softwares. So, but the thing that's a very cool tool. I mean, I won't show it around, but it has that's the one I've been impressed with for the past 2 years. Every step of the way, every new tool they've been adding to this, I've been very impressed compared to Revit and its new features like looking through the tree of views and everything.
Hmm.
There's not much
Yeah.
happening on the Revit side compared to iPower.
I also feel like Revit development is quite slow, especially considering all the prices and investments. I
Yeah,
think it should be way ahead of its curve.
yeah, it should be.
Hi, real quick. If you're into PyRevit and you want to boost your skills in record time, then check learnrevitapi.com platform. You'll find free in-depth courses for any stage of your programming journey. You'll get access to PyRevit Basics, Pro, and Modern UI courses. Plus, you'll also get access to my code library and join my exclusive community for PyRevit developers. In the community, we can chat, discuss programming in Revit, and most importantly, you can ask for help when you need it the most. If that sounds interesting, go to learnrevit.com to learn more. And now, back to the show. Yeah, we got a little bit sidetracked, so let's go back a little bit to PyRevit. I want to ask you, what was the first PyRevit tool that you made that you really what was the most satisfying tool that you made in PyRevit?
In terms of the size, the smallest one I did was probably turning on and off the structural model, the structural function of walls and columns. Um, I noticed many years back now, but I noticed that whenever you had all your walls with the structural parameter ticked, the model was twice the size, twice as slow, and twice as everything. And then I did just one tool that just took care of just turning it off, one click, that's it. And the tool is like 3 lines of code. That's it. And I was so happy when I did that one because I knew that I could reuse it over and over again. Whenever I was opening a model of one of my clients, I would do that at first to see if there was anything turned on. And if so, I could tell them right away, okay, then you can squeeze the size by 50% just doing that. It's not, yeah, with 3 lines of code, you could just generate like a lot of speed actually in the Revit model. Another one I did was I talked about it earlier, but the spaghetti plate for the quality control. This one I designed it in Dynamo, and that's the one that got me into coding properly. That's where I really started coding in Python and understanding the Revit API and know how to look for information in the Revit API and try to deal with that. And I, with PyRevit 5, I did a new implementation of it and I made it public. So that's just brand new, fresh, hot from the press. So that's in the pre-flight check. So that I didn't want to add an extra icon, and it's audit all here. And it's going to collect everything you see here, even more than that. Actually, I didn't update this list, but it's going to collect it also for the linked files. So you don't have to open the linked file. You just make it and run it once and for all this way.
Can you also explain what is the pre-flight checks? Because many people, even who use PyRevit, they're not aware about this
Yeah.
feature. Just in general, as a regular user, maybe even not even
I mean,
coder in mind.
pre-flight check, it's like you can add a new tool to pyRevit without adding a new icon, basically, and you can make it do whatever you want. So here I'm doing a QA/QC, and that's the whole name pre-flight check is just checking things into Revit. That was the first purpose of it. And the first one I did was based on the model checker that David Vatkerty did himself. And I did improve it to make it happen into pyRevit as part of pyRevit. And later on, the tool, the model checker, was doing pretty much everything I was doing in Dynamo, except that it was not looking into the Revit link files. And that's something that is, once you know a bit of the Revit API, that's something that is so easy to make, actually. I mean, you just change the document. Instead of taking the actual document, you're using the link document file and you're done. You can ask it everything you want. So this one is going through the main file info, and then after that it goes through the links. You see that's just a sample.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the structural MEP and everything. And then it gives you the instance name, the loading status, if it's loaded or not, and if it's pinned or not, because that's good practice to pin it. And then after that, you get numbers around critical elements, some rooms numbers, sheets and views, general numbers, and some view count per type, template, cat files, families, graphical, 2D elements, and so on. And you get that for every single link file.
Mm-hmm.
And then
No, this is great overview already.
yeah, I mean, if you the color coding, I want to change it and make it customizable. I already have the skeleton for that, but I didn't take the time to finish it because I wanted to make the code neat, because that's something to make code, but I can code very, very fast, but it looks like trash. There's no structure. It's not going fast enough because of this and that. But this tool, I made it the fastest I could, the nicest I could. So that was a learning moment for me actually, and I did enjoy it. It took me 2 months actually to recode, and refactor everything.
I think when we start, it's actually beneficial to go as fast as you can. It's gonna
Yeah,
be dirty and horrible, but you need a proof of concept
yeah.
because sometimes you spend like a lot of time on the first steps, then you realize that you have a roadblock here and you cannot go further. So it's a little bit easier to kind of leave the tool for later. Instead, just go through once and see, okay, I can make all the steps quickly. Now I can improve all of them one by one.
But also one thing is that whenever you're coding, you don't necessarily look through the API of pyRevit and see what functions are available, what you can use. So you're just using the basic Revit API stuff. And that's good up to a point, but you have so many shortcuts with pyRevit that I mean, the code I did for this one was probably 1,000 lines of code total. And if I were to not use all the shortcuts of pyRevit, that would be probably 3 times the size, at least.
Could be. Could you also tell us where to find the source code for that one? Because I know with pre-flight checks, it's not as
Yeah,
straightforward.
yeah, this one is different because if you just alt click on this one and it opens the window, you will see the pre-flight check source code, but only for the UI of the tool, basically. So that's
Yes,
not what
so
you're
sort of
looking
for the
for.
menu where you select which one to run.
So you need to go a bit higher in the hierarchy of the code of pyRevit. So if you go in the pyRevit tools extension here, you'll find a folder that is named checks. You can have that folder in pretty much any extension actually. So whenever you have a dot extension, if you have a folder like that, you can make your own tools and list them this way.
But they're still gonna be activated with the same pre-flight check button, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's the parsing process. That's one of the things that is pretty slow actually with pyRevit, the parsing process of all the tools. This is one of the pieces that makes it a bit slower. Okay, let me just open it so that you just see the code itself. So
Yeah,
all the imports and all
yeah, that's a
that.
big one.
Yeah, that's a fairly big one. And I'm trying to use the proper way to code things, even though I'm still learning every day. And I try to create classes to make it cleaner and more efficient. And then, well, you get the drill after that. And one thing that you won't notice, um, this tool needs to get some configuration. So the first time you will run the pre-flight check with pyRevit 5, you will need to shift click on that and point to the critical warnings CSV if you don't have your own, because that's something that you need to check against to identify what is critical for you as a warning in Revit.
So when people gonna run for the first time, they're not gonna have this file at all. Or there is some.
The critical warning file is coming out of the box. I have one. It's more architectural oriented, actually, but because it's checking for the room separation, the room enclosing, and the duplication of items and duplication of mark type. But you can customize it. That's just a CSV. That's very simple to make. And this tool also, the cool thing that you have in the background as well is that the pre-flight check, the audit all allows you to export everything. So you can export it and tell him where to export the stuff. And then whenever you run it, if you run it once a day, because I put a limit on that, I don't want people to have like thousands of lines of extra data for the same day. It doesn't make sense. Whenever you run that, if it checks against the name of the files and it's going to write a CSV, and then you can find your CSV up there. Let me go back. Here you get your project data and can see, okay, it's not properly. I'm just going to open it with Notepad or something. Yeah, just a block note, that would be enough. So that's all the data that you can extract, and then you can make your dashboard the way you want. So you can use Power BI and you have the date. So that means you can make historical follow-up of all your data. So you can make graphs with the warnings, how the warning curves is going up or down, if people are taking care of their file properly or not.
Can we take a little step back? So new users, they just install pyRevit, they go to pre-flight check, and you said it's not going to work as expected if they're going to try to use it.
The way it's going to work is they're going to get a pop-up saying that they need to configure it. So the way to configure it, whenever you have a black dot behind next to it, you need to shift-click to configure it. And then you're going to get this pop-up that tells you select the CSV containing the critical warning UIDs.
And this file already going to be there by default.
Yeah.
This is the one that,
It's
okay,
gonna
this was.
Yeah, proper location for everything. You don't have to worry about it at all. It's very
So I just want to simplify for the people that it's not like you have to go find all the rules. You just point, okay, here's the file, use it, and then, okay.
Yeah. And then after that, you can point to wherever you want if you need to. And then if you want to see where it's pointing, actually, I can show you that. It's always happening in the same place, actually. If you go to app data, that's an environment variable that brings you to the user folder. And then you type pyRevit, and then you'll find the master. Sorry, not the master. I've always misplaced it. pyRevit config.ini ini file. And then you can just open that, and you will find all the information like the pre-flight check config here with the current folder. And then you get the critical warning list that has been fetched when I set it up, and then where it's being exported if you need to.
Yeah, I think that's also a big topic, this pre-flight check. Gonna be honest, I pretty much avoided it all the time because I just didn't understand it and I just wasn't as interested. But I think there's a lot of potential in this pre-flight check, especially with you adding all these pre-flight checks and many other people. The fact that it's so reusable, that's what might get people interested in that.
Yeah, in the 3 months or 4 months ago, I initiated a pre-flight check hackathon, and that's why we got 3 or 4 extra ones actually. Because at the very beginning, we got only 2 or 3. That's it. Just like the schedule not on list or the grid data list or whatever. And then we got a few new ones like the 10-mile radar, which is interesting. It's just checking if there's any items outside of the 10-mile radius thing. You have a naming convention checker that works mostly for walls now, but we might refactor it later. And you get a CAD audit as well that helps you figuring out what's imported, what is not, and everything. And the people that did these pieces of code, I mean, one was, I would say, average coder, and the two other ones were very beginners. And that was interesting because the way the hackathon worked this time was they got a lot of critiques from the main maintainers of pyRevit saying, okay, your code needs to be refactored a bit, you need to use this and that and all that. And I think they learned a lot actually in the process.
Oh yeah, if somebody looks at your code, tells you like, look, focus on that, change this, this can be huge because it directs you to your attention. Because in the beginning, just write the code. We look, for us, it's great because that's the best we could make. But when somebody tells you, okay, focus on that, that's great.
Yeah, and Andrea, which is my right arm, and sometimes the left one as well, for that is very good at coding because that's his day job, and his critiques are always a learning piece, like really interesting stuff. I learned so much in the past year because of him.
I might need to bring him on the show as well one day. We're going all over the place. I think that's fine. Because now I also probably want to talk about pyRevit CLI and how to deploy pyRevit across all machines in a large team? Because that's a big questions I get quite often. On small companies, it's quite easy. We usually have a folder, we link all pyRevits there, and that's fine. But once the team gets big, that becomes a big question. Could you just share what are the options, what's the best, what works easiest, and so on?
Yeah, I'm going to show you the way I would do it quickly. But first, let me explain what is a CLI. So basically on every computer, you have a command line interface. It looks like this. So if you type CMD, for example, but you can type pretty much anything, you get the command line. And then from there, you can run many different commands by default in Windows. That's a Windows program. And once you install pyRevit itself, it comes with its own CLI. But you also have the option to install the CLI alone without having pyRevit installed in Revit, but just the CLI command itself. And if you type pyRevit once you have the CLI installed, you're gonna get this, just this. So you can have a look.
So this just confirms that you have it and here
Yeah,
how to use
you
it.
have it, it's running, that's a software that is installed and you can do something with it. Then after that, you just need to learn how to read and that's it. If you type pyRevit and you type -- usage, you'll get all the commands available through the CLI. And that's a good way to start, a very good one.
A little intimidating at first for sure, but
Yeah, but if you just go line by line, I mean,
it's very repetitive, I can see it.
and if you use pyRevit previously, you should not be that lost after a bit. But let me explain a few of the commands. I'm just going to skip many of those, obviously, because we don't want to spend so much time on it. Basically, the pyRevit clone, what it allows you to do is getting the repo or a version of the repo that you made, because it's possible to duplicate pyRevit, and install it on the machine from the CLI. So if you type the command pyRevit clone and then give it a name, and then you use one of the deployment of pyRevit, there's 3 that are listed, or maybe more than this actually, or you can use your own image, being a git address, .git, a repo with a .git at the end, and then you tell it where to install it, and eventually which branch you want to install, branch being a version of your repo.
Maybe we can open pyRevit on this side, the GitHub, so we can also relate.
I was about to do it. Yeah. So here, when you're in the front page of any Git repository, you will see all the branches here, actually. So here,
Sorry, can you make it side by side while you explain so you can see both of them? That would, yeah, like this is perfect.
so those are my branches on pyRevit. So you have the develop branch, which is the main one where the job is happening. The master is the one that is used by the release. So it's not changing every day, it's changing once every 6 months-ish.
So this is the official versions.
Yeah, that's whenever you go from 4.8.16 to 5, it's happening there. And then you get a few extra one. That's one of the pull requests that is being designed now, and that's the documentation site that is being published through this one. So this is a branch. So if you want to get a clone of pyRevit, you can use the master branch and you get the latest changes of the release, or you can get the develop branch where you get all the latest change ever. Like I did some changes 3 hours ago. Like I mentioned, like for the website, I had to do some changes there. So, so if you use this command, you can do pyRevit clone name, you name it EF tools, for example. You put deployment name, you can use the base public one, and then put the destination where you want to save it.
What do you mean, the base public one? It can also be anything, right?
Let me check. Let me check because I don't know them by heart, but let me check where it's located because I can't remember. That's it in here. So here you get all the official deployments here. You see you have a list here and you get the core deployment, the core X, the base public, and then the base X. And then these are the folders that are included into each deployment. So if you want to have the bare minimum, you just get the core. If you want to have the base, like pretty much everything that is in a regular release, you can get the base, and you don't get all the extra coding crap with it. And if you want to get everything, you just get the base public here.
Yeah, so here are the 3 options. Well, 4. There's also base X, but okay.
So one way, I mean, I can show you like that. It just pyRevit, clone. So you cannot make any typo in there. So that's painful sometimes. Let me call it a EFT. And then I'm going to take the core one because that's a small one. And I'm going to put a destination, which will be wherever I put all my pyRevit stuff. Always put it there. And then it's just going to download in the background the GitHub repo as a zip file with only what's necessary in it. Okay, let me just change that. See. And it's going to pop up here once it's done. So it takes some time because the repo is kind of big. But once it's done, it's going to be unzipped here.
So this step is just kind of clones it from the GitHub to your machine.
Yeah.
It doesn't connect it to Revit. It doesn't change anything.
No.
It just kind of downloads the file.
No, not yet. Not yet. There's a second command that you need to have. So if you're an IT guy trying to deploy everything, what you can do is just install the CLI on every computer. And then from there, you can make a batch file to make it happen. So you see here, I have my EFT folder, and inside of it, I have the bin folder, the pyRevit lib, the site package, and pyRevit file. And that's pretty much what was listed here.
So these are the kind of packages.
Yeah, it packaged
like templates, what to download.
That's exactly templates and packages. That's the best way to describe it. And then after that, if you want to attach it to Revit, you need to use the pyRevit command attach. And then you attach what? You attach the name of your clone. Here it's EFT. You set the engine. So the engine can be IronPython, CPython, and sometimes different versions if you have a local build. I'm just going to use the default one. And then you tell it which version of Revit you want to install it to. So you can specify the year, or you can specify install it for every installed version. So that's what I do most of the time. And you want to install it for every users or not. And if you want to do that, you just do it this way, or users, that's it. And then if you want to check it, if it's installed properly, you can just run the pyRevit env, which is environment, the short for environment. And it's just going to list your clone here, registered clone, and then after that, the attachment. And EFT is attached to Revit 2025, 24, 23, etc.
So a few questions here. It means that by using this CLI, we can create 5 different pyRevit versions for some reason. We can attach one version to 2025, another one to 2024. Obviously, probably people are going to just attach to all Revit versions, but there is an option, right?
Yeah,
Maybe someone
there's
wants
always
to
an
have...
option. Like the core one doesn't come with any of the extensions, meaning any of the tools inside Revit. So that means you won't get the toolbar actually. You'll get just the bare minimum, basically
just the engine.
The engine of pyRevit. Yeah, you can get an extra one that has the core toolbar, which is core X. Here you will get the core toolbar. This one contains the setup, the settings for pyRevit, and also the extension management. So that's probably most of the time people would use this one, the core X, to deploy.
A few other questions. So how can you see a list of all available pyRevit options, all the clones that you have?
Yeah, just guess it. pyRevit clones, you have the list.
Now, another question. Probably this is what's going to be on the mind of a lot of people. So let's say I have my regular pyRevit and I have my extension, right? EF tools, for example, I'm working on it.
Yeah.
Now, I understand that you can clone it, you attach it to another pyRevit. It doesn't affect your extension that you're working on.
Yeah.
Because some people might have tools that they didn't touch, but when they're going to change the clone, they're not going to see their extension, right? because the first one is going to be inside of the first extension. Does it make sense?
The way it works is that you can point to pretty much anything, either on GitHub or either locally. So whenever you're in Windows here and I want to start making my own extension, I would start this way. I would just do a first folder, blah, 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 extension, and then I'm good to go. I already have the base for it. And then after that, I need to go through the whole structure. So once I've done that, I can attach it. So I can just run pyRevit, attach, and then point to that specific folder. Sorry, that's not attach, that's extend. Yeah, sorry. Extend UI and then point to the proper location and all that. Actually, if you want to know which command are available with any of these keywords like extend, you can just dash dash H and then you get the list of the commands that are available. You can just do extend and then help and then extend and the name of the extension, the destination where you want to save it, and the branch if it's coming from GitHub. And you also have the options to do libraries only or UI type of extension, point to the repo and all that, and use a token. Now, actually, this is not usable anymore. GitHub doesn't support it, but you use token to have a private repo pointed out.
Yeah, it's annoying that they went with this extra security, remove the passwords. All right, so from what I see right now, we can create multiple clones of pyRevit, and each of these clones have its own, how to say it, its own paths to different extensions, like EF Tools extension, PyChilizer, something, and we have to attach it sort of individually to each of your pyRevit clone.
Yeah, so you would probably have a different command every time, like pyRevit extend, blah, 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 first extension, second, third, if you want to. And one thing I think in most companies, some people are worried about some of the tools that are available by default. So they can do their own clone of pyRevit, remove the tools they don't want to their user to use, and then not populate, but just deploy that version of pyRevit without the tools like for example, the wipe tools. Pretty alarming sometimes if you don't know what you're doing with it. And you could remove that if you want.
So you can make a short version of pyRevit specifically for the company.
You could remove all the tools here, make your own extension with only the tools you want your people to use, and that's it.
So you can vet everything that goes in the company, and you know that
everything. Yeah, from a IT point of view, that would be probably the best way to do it. If you're really into control freak type of IT. But I mean, if you're using any kind of add-in outside of the Autodesk environment, I mean, you still have a security risk somehow. So it just, you probably don't know which one, but there is always a risk anyway. So
no, this is really great news. The reason I was asking all those previous questions because I know that people who have pyRevit installed, they have their extension that they spend months working on. And when they're going to clone to a new pyRevit, they might see that it disappears. It's not deleting anything. It's just kind of using different, I don't know, pyRevits.
Whenever you're doing your local deployment, usually you didn't start it with a GitHub repo. So that's why it's kind of messy, because the first time you work all local, no GitHub repo set up. And then after a while, you say, oh, I want to put it on GitHub now. So you create your repo, but what you forget is that you will need to reinstall it from the repo so that it points with the proper folder. So usually you do your extend UI, whatever, to your local folder. And then after a while you're done, you do the GitHub version. So then you'll need to point to whatever HTTPS, GitHub, whatever, and then .git. But this will need to sit and live in a different folder eventually, so that you don't work on the local one and forget that you already have the online one available and you need to push your changes there every time. That happened to me quite a few times. I forgot that, and I was working for an extension for a client, and I forgot that I was only local at first. I did the change, and I didn't see the change on my toolbar, and I was like, "What? What is happening?" That's just because sometimes you just need to just go away from the computer and just think again what you're doing.
Maybe we're gonna first finish the installation part. Can you just take us through the commands again? And then later we'll look into the updating part.
Yeah, for the installation, okay, let me show you the proper IT way, actually, all the way. One nice, there's actually two ways that are, in my opinion, better.
So what kind of company size are we talking right now? It's like 20, 100 computers.
I mean, it depends if you have somebody IT in the team or if it's someone you hire, a consultant. Usually the consultant won't have time to deal or doesn't know about pyRevit, so they won't bother so much, and they would use probably Intune and just get the MSI or .exe file and just install it remotely this way without controlling anything, any of the tools available or anything. But what one way to do it would be to just, for an IT guy, to just grab the CLI and install it by default on every computer. First step. Then the second step would be to either go through the command line and enter it at startup, which would mean that you would need to go through Notepad or whatever code editor, and then you would need to write down your commands in line, like pyRevit, blah, 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 attach, extend, clone. And that's something that is already pretty well explained actually in this article that we have here. You have all the steps for proper deployment and with all the explanation. If you go through this, there's very little room for mistakes, very little, in my opinion. I mean, if you at least know how to turn on a computer and use a CLI, basically. So you can install the files located on the network, for example. This is just an example here. And then after that, in the same batch file, you can specify your default folders and directories. And then you can point to the proper Git location if you have one. And then you're just checking here the folders. And then that's where the fun is starting. So that's where you're running your first pyRevit clone command, where it's getting the stuff from GitHub and copying it into the computer. And then from there, you can go on and install some extension, like we said, pyRevit extend, then whatever the command line tells you to do. And here you get, those are all the steps. And I think, if I remember right, because I didn't use it quite a while, after that you can run a PowerShell command to run the PS1, because that's a PowerShell script that is being written here. You can run the PS1 file with just a startup command at the whenever the person is logging in, for example. So what it will do, it will silently install the CLI, run the pyRevit clone command, attach the clone to Revit, and then after that you can extend, adding some more extension, and you can also configure pyRevit. So if you have a telemetry server, you can configure it. You can have a seed file with a configuration already pre-made and attach it to Revit. So the file I showed you earlier, like the pyRevit config, I don't think I kept it open. This file can be seeded. So that means everything that I have into here, I can seed it from a different location and put it on everybody's computer all at once, so that you don't have to worry about the default extension being installed, disabled, enabled, or the extra extension that you want to use and all that.
And if you would like to include your own company extension,
you can do that there as well. You can do that here. I'm not sure. Let me check. Um, Not sure I'm set up for that to show you that right now, but no, I'm not. But you know that whenever you're in pyRevit here into the settings, you have a custom directory that you can set up for your extensions. And here you can add some more. The fact that you add one, let me remove this and add it again. That might help. So I would point to my folder wherever I have my extensions. And this is where, once I save and reload, this the config file will be updated, and I will have a new line with the proper folder location added to it, and I can then use that, or I can even type it manually if I want to. That will work. I just need to restart Revit every time.
Okay, I see. Can you just show us a little bit more commands? Because it's great that people can see all the CLI commands, but when they see you type it and explain it, I think it makes so much more sense.
Let me explain some of those. Okay, so we went through the clone one here. So cloning meaning you take a GitHub repo containing your pyRevit version, if it's the official one or non-official one, and you can get a copy and then you can attach it to Revit. So that's the command that is named attach here. And then you use that command pyRevit attach, you name the clone, you go with the default engine. By default, that would be my best choice. And then you decide either it's attached to a year or to all version or to the ones that are already attached. Well, and then you attach it to all users or not. If you don't specify all users, that means that every time a new person will log into the computer, they won't have access to that clone by default. After that, for the clones, I won't get into details for that. That's more advanced for now, but basically it's for more pyRevit developers. That's a helper for us. So that helps us to get a proper copy of a precise branch and start developing around it. pyRevit attach will list you all the pyRevit version attached to which year, basically like the pyRevit env did. But let me show it to you as well. pyRevit attached will give you this. So here I did mess it up in the meantime, but that's the name of my clone, and it's attached to Revit 2025 with the default engine, and it's pointing to all users and it's located there. And that what it tells you is that you can attach a different clone to a different version of Revit. So that means if you have sets of tools, for example, already pre-made for a specific version of Revit, you can be a bit more precise, and you can also be more precise in terms of the engine you want to use. Here it's IronPython 2.7.12. You could use CPython if you want to. Good luck with that. Or you could use IronPython 3.4. That is available already. 3.4.2 or 12, I forgot.
Can I also ask about this, why pyRevit is still using 2.7.12 instead of 3.4?
That's because in the background, what allows pyRevit to work is what is called PythonNet. PythonNet is an interface between Python and .NET. The API of Revit is in .NET, and there's no way you can directly communicate with .NET through Python without PythonNet. So PythonNet is the middleman, let's say, with Revit. And the IronPython engine is compatible with the version of PythonNet that we're using that as a wrapper for the Revit API. So basically, you have a middleman, and this middleman doesn't have necessarily all the language to talk to the Revit API, even though it's able to talk to it with a proper language. It doesn't have all the words around it. So whenever I'm calling a filtered element collector, for example, it doesn't know about it. So I need to wrap it around. I need to make a wrapper for that. And PythonNet has a wrapper around the Revit API through the IronPython engine through 2.4, 2.7, 2 whatever. So that's the version that is supported actually. It's possible to use IronPython 3.4, but the wrapper is not as neat, and there's some new convention in terms of coding. And 90% of the tools, at least, are coded with IronPython. And that's one thing that we are trying to think about, how to shift it to earlier version of Python and make it more compatible with it. But it's kind of hard because we need to first refactor the code base of pyRevit to do that. And that's not a small task.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's something that will happen eventually, but we don't have the manpower to do it today. One thing I can mention here is that I've been in touch with the people of Dynamo and all that, because they are facing the same issue as we do, actually. The difference is that they have the money of Autodesk on the back. But they started developing a version of PythonNet 3, which will have all the wrapper and everything. It's not open source yet, but they told me that it will be. So we might
Oh,
be
this
able
is
to use
great.
it later. So that's why we're not putting too much effort on that as well, because it doesn't make sense to double job and spread the energy that we have on that.
Yeah, it makes sense because anyway, if there is something that can be used by both pyRevit and Dynamo, this is great.
Yeah.
Hey guys, we took a short break here, so real quick. Could you just scroll down under this video to the comment section and write me what did you like the most about the podcast and what you didn't like at all? Your feedback will really help me make better episodes in the future. It will be highly appreciated. Thanks a ton, and let's go back to the show. All right, so where we are.
We're looking through the different commands, actually. Let me bring it back here. So here, if you run the pyRevit extension, it will list you all the extensions that are installed. So the way it looks would be like this, extensions. So you see here, it detected already my folder with the dot extension, because I already had the C pyRevit folder implemented in my setup.
And if you're gonna have something like default extension, additional like EF tools, PyChilizer, all of these, are they also gonna be listed here?
They will be listed at the same place, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I could actually show that. Let me check. Let me bring this back here. Let's go for EF tools repo. Let's see if I can get it to install. If it's properly formatted, yeah, that's it. That's good. Not add. I want to get. So that's the address I need. Or basically, you could just type .git at the end of the.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so just URL with .git.
Yeah, and then pyRevit extend UI, and then I need to put a name if I'm right, but if I don't know, I can check. So I need to give it, hold on, here this way, that will be easier. Extend, so UI, let's call it EF2, and then the repo, and then the destination. That's it. That's all you need. At the bare minimum would be this. And then it's gonna download. You didn't name it master, so that's a good trick actually to show that here. So yours is master or main? I never know.
I'm not sure.
That's main. Okay, so I need to specify the branch. That's what it's saying actually. It says there's no
Mhm.
master, so I need to specify the branch. And if I look here, the branch, the way to specify it, or here, is this way. So I just need to do this. If you don't know actually how I did this trick here, up and down arrows, if you want to go down or up the history of the command line, that's pretty useful.
Yeah, it's always very useful.
Branch, and then we said main. And now it's working. And now if I go into my folder, I should be able to see it on up. EF2 extension, and everything is there and all good. And then if I go back and to show precisely that it's going to be listed here, you see EF tools, that's a UI type extension, and then you get the repo and everything.
No, that's great.
One way, actually, it's not the whole workflow here yet, but one way to go through the whole workflow is that your extension, some of the time you will need to update the extension because you did some change. in the code base.
That was my question coming.
See? You would need to use the pyRevit extensions and then update, and then you can tell it or the extension name, and that's it. And if it's a private repo, you will need probably to specify the extension name, and then after that the token, and that's it.
So this is how it will always kind of update from the GitHub.
One way I did set it up on my custom extension or private extension was to have a startup script. So I use a startup script, and inside the startup script, I'm running a command that use subprocess, and that goes and type this the update, so that my token is being used, and then it's fetching. Every time I'm starting Revit, it's just going to check if there's some new code in my extension.
Does it add a lot of time to kind of loading up Revit?
No, it's probably a couple of milliseconds.
Okay, because anyway, it's going to be
it's pretty much nothing. The biggest part actually is more the fetching of all the tools.
Yeah, that's actually a good thing.
I got a pretty big amount of tools in my own toolbars, and it didn't take time at all. The time it took was more the number of add-ins that I got loaded in Revit. That's what.
Okay, so it doesn't add much time. I know that many people concerned about this. I see a lot of discussions that people, okay, which extension should I get rid of and so on. So,
I mean, if you want to get rid of something, yes, please do, because it's always taking time. I mean, if you remove pyRevit from Revit, your Revit's going to be twice faster at start only. But that's just the starting process of Revit. That's it. And that's why we want to make the engine that parse all the tools and make the UI faster, because we know that's where it takes a lot of time to load.
Yeah, but I think once you start using pyRevit, the time you save.
The extra time is probably 5 seconds extra. That's not much more, so it shouldn't worry you. I mean, when you think about syncing a Revit file that has like 20 links and it's like 2 gigs total of links, then you know that wasting 5 seconds when you open Revit is nothing.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, a few ones also that is different from the clone. Actually, is just you can get the release installer here directly using pyRevit release download installer, and you can even use a search pattern. So if you want to download something specific, an old version, you can. Even though GitHub has a history of keeping the releases up to a point. Obviously, it's not going like 20 years back. A cool tool here that you can use as an IT is using just pyRevit Revits, and it's going to list all the Revits that are available on the computer. And you can also kill a Revit process if you want from the command line.
To close all open Revit,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can specify anything. And then after that, one of the main one that not so many people use.
That's a big one.
pyRevit run. You can run a pyRevit file or a Python file on top on any kind of models, list of models, and it's going to run the script. It still needs to be architectured in such a way that it uses some specific execution parameters.
Mm-hmm.
It's still pretty workable. I mean, if you just go with the simple stuff at first, make a simple hello world kind of Python file, it's fairly easy to use.
I used it in the past for backups, but I lost that file. I actually went into that. I had like text file explaining myself what's going on, and then I lost it. I was so pissed because I didn't want to go this rabbit hole again, but it's really useful one.
I could imagine, for example, you have like a very tedious process of implementing some shared parameters, whatever, and you already have the code ready and the list of shared parameters and the list of categories. You could run it on the list of all your models at once without having people to worry about it. So there's many use case that I can think of. Quality control. I mean, you could collect every data that you need from the server with a batch file and making it a task. a scheduled
Hmm.
task, and every weekend you would collect all the information of all your Revit files at once.
Hmm.
You can make your whatever management dashboard if you want to.
Yeah, it's great for kind of backups, getting the data out of the model. It has all the potential.
Yeah, or even exporting stuff. Like, I mean, I tend to prefer add-in exporters add-ins, like a real one with money behind it and everything, because it's much more reliable and you don't want to spend too much time. You want to gain sometimes. So if the exporter add-in is worth $100, it's really worth it usually. You don't want, I mean, $100 of time for coding an exporter, you won't get far probably. So you always need to weigh the return on investment that you're spending in coding.
I think it makes sense once you have specific workflows or you have a large office, but majority cases, yeah, sometimes it's also wiser.
Yeah, it depends on the scale, obviously, but yeah, but there's some pretty cool ones. I mean, if you use a Revit Express, not Express, I forgot the name, RVT exporter tools, very cool exporter, reliable. I've used it for like 12 years now, and it's just so worth it. Like very reliable, nothing to complain about it ever. And it's not the case with code. You always have to take care of the new API of Revit sometimes because there's a change here and there. So it's not coding is great, but it's not always a solution. Sometimes you just need to use the tools you have. And
Yeah, we get in the habit that we have to kind of hack through it, do it
yeah,
ourselves.
no, you need to know the software well, and then you can hack if needs to. But
Yeah,
no,
yeah, yeah.
I mean, unless it's really your learning process, you want to learn a lot and you have the time for it. But if you're
Hmm.
in a working environment, I guess you don't have that much time. Yeah, and one last thing, maybe, yeah, last thing I wanted to mention was the configs here. You can, like I mentioned, you can seed a configuration file for pyRevit, but you can also edit any of these specific parameters that are available in the settings. So you can enable, disable the auto update, the rocket mode, and whatever, or change the engines for CPython, the color docs, the ones that most of people use in pyRevit.
Is it general one, or do you have to specify which clone of pyRevit you assign it to?
The config file is not designed to be per Revit version or pyRevit version. It's one that is always located at the same location.
Okay.
You could do it, but I'm not even sure it's architectured in a way that you can by default.
Yeah, I just want to make sure. And what is the pyRevit doctor? I definitely want to know that one.
You want to know that? It has a few functions. That's something that Esan, I think, if I'm not wrong, Esan designed it when he was kind of sick of telling people to fix a specific thing with pyRevit because they had old
Pun
installations.
intended.
Yeah, so that was his helper. Now we have AI, so that helps, or slash command in GitHub to have like um, canned responses. So here you see there's only one command, purge install.
Ah, okay. So that's for internal use.
Yeah, but
I'm just curious, what is a doctor in pyRevit?
we could add some more functions so that we don't have to have all these issues on GitHub all the time about the same stuff over and
Hmm.
over. But the one other way to fix it would be to change the installer and to change the way pyRevit loads and everything. We know why. We just need to find the time to make it happen.
Yeah, it all goes that pyRevit needs a bit more support to get the manpower behind it.
Yeah, mostly manpower, and after that, yeah, if there's some money behind, that's easier for us to eventually hire someone to do the job. The CLI, it's a big topic. I mean, that's something that people don't see, but that's a huge one. And if you want to remember only two commands, I suggest remembering pyrevit env. That gives you the setup of your computer with pyrevit, so you get all the information you need. And that's something that we need whenever you open an issue on GitHub. We need that. We ask for it. So don't bother sending an issue without this. We won't answer so much. And the other one would be PyRevit usage. and that lists all the commands, and that's it. You're good to go after that.
Yeah, and then you just follow these instructions. I think now with AI, if you copy that, drop in AI, and ask questions, it can also guide you pretty well.
Yeah, you'll get there. You'll get there. I mean, the latest model are perfect. Even DeepSeek, it's perfect. When I did my refactoring of the model checker thing, I used DeepSeek at one point because I didn't know how to properly organize the object-oriented parts of the code I had, because I'm not so familiar with some of the aspects of it. And I asked for it, and I got some answers that were very, very good and interesting, and that got me like so much further than what I would usually code.
Yeah, it's great at refactoring because when you refactor, you already have the code. You just need to make it a bit more, make more sense and easier to read. I think it's really good for that.
And one thing, yeah, talking about AI, one thing I can show you is that here, if you see the latest pull request now, let me show you. Ooh, I don't know. Let's say this one. I've been starting to use Devlo AI, which is a bot in GitHub that you can use on pull requests and issues to fix those. And it's very good, actually. It's very, very convenient and usable. And so every pull request now is getting through that bot and giving us answers that are, I mean, pyRevit is a very niche topic with very niche Iron Python engine and everything and all that. So you still need to be a bit picky about what it suggests, but it's usually not bad at all. I mean, personally, I wouldn't do the transaction this way. I would use the context manager and all that, but still that works, and that's so much better than what it is before. So,
Yeah, at least it suggests you something, points to the right places.
and that frees us maintainers to do the first pass, so that we get a PR that is bearable and not a trashy one with codes all over the place and bad practice and all that.
Right. I think we have to wrap it up. I just have a few little questions if you have time for this.
Yeah.
Right. So, firstly, about the CLI, when should people consider using it? How big their team needs to be to actually kind of go into this?
I think 5, it's okay. It's already okay. It depends also on the turnover in the team and the turnover in the computers. But usually 5 would be the smallest possible, probably. But it depends also if you want to configure pyRevit to your needs. If you're really picky about what tool your team needs to use, then if it's only 2 people, that's still already usable, and you could use it right away. But after that, if you go in enterprises, I mean, once you're at 10 people, you need to use it. You're wasting time if not, especially for all the updating process and all that. That's a huge gain.
No, it makes sense. I think that the CLI has this because you have to open the console, it turns many people away, myself included, kind of.
But once you know how to use a console, I mean, that opens so many new ways of thinking about how to deploy things, how to handle large amounts of folders and files and all that. And that's the first entry of computer from day one, mostly. So
No, I think just seeing you doing it, it just simplifies it. I know how to use console. I was just like, I just don't want to bother it. I not kind of all the commands are there. You just have to kind of try it until it works. But seeing someone doing it and explaining it just breaks this barrier. You're like, oh, I can write 10 words. Yeah.
and like I mentioned off, the CLI is 90% fine, but there's a few little things that do not work, and we know about it, that there's already issues open about it. But for most of the use cases that people have in general, there's no problem. It's up and running. You need to use the MSI or you use Chocolatey. That's something I didn't show, but you can use Chocolatey to import or use the CLI more directly than through the installer if you need to.
Can you just open the website of the Chocolatey so people know what you refer to?
Yeah, that's a package manager. So pretty much like NuGet or things like that. And you can basically deploy your package on this website and invoke the website to install the software you need. So if you look for pyRevit, you will find it. I didn't use it so much, so I'm gonna be lost a bit, I guess. Install, no. Yeah, that's where you'll find it. Then you get the commands to install it, add to script builder, and then you're good to go. Go install pyRevit CLI. That's it.
All right, and now I want to wrap it with the last question. And can you give like number one advice you would give to beginner programmers? Where should they focus? Just like, what are your thoughts? How should beginner programmer begin with just coding in general, not specifically pyRevit, but maybe Python?
Well, pyRevit is a good place to start, definitely, because you see the code that's behind the tools. So that gives you insights on how to code in Python and how to code with a Revit API. So that's a good asset. But two contradictory advice, maybe. Go fast and break things. Best way ever. But don't skip on the basics. I'm talking for myself. Don't skip on the basics ever, ever.
I can join in as well. I also skipped on basics for a while.
I mean, I'm getting more and more interested in object-oriented programming for Python because I didn't go through that properly. But now I'm at a level of coding where I kind of get it already, but I still need to, now I need to learn it properly and go through the documentation and try to find out how inheritance works properly, how to do this and that.
There's actually a good website. Just give me a second. Python refactor called patterns. I'm gonna tell you how to find it. Yeah, that one. Do you know about this website? Okay, so scroll on the left, click on design patterns. Yeah. And here you can find all kind of design patterns, object-oriented programming. This website describes it really well. If you're gonna go up and click on, for example, creational or no, wait a second. On the left in catalog, click on creational patterns or something like this. Here you have all
Yeah,
this very
yeah,
common.
I've seen some pictures of this one a long time ago. But yeah, that's exactly the kind of website I would need to go through.
Yeah, because in here, if you're gonna click on any of them, let's go with the factory method or builder or something. Here it has this very simple explanation what it is, what it's for, and it gives you examples in C#, Python, Java, I think in pretty much all languages.
Yeah, that's cool.
I haven't gone through this as extensively as I would like as well, but I know it exists and I saw it's very nicely packed in one place, so I think you will also find it useful for something.
That reminds me that that's something that I mentioned to some of the maintainers. What I want to do is I want to do some sort of UML about pyRevit so that we get a map of pyRevit because it's very hard to navigate it. We already have a few things in place like the developer website here. I mean the API website we have. We have some developer guide, and Andrea Sanzo Genzi did that. And if you want to start coding pyRevit stuff, not only the tools, but coding, like really helping coding pyRevit itself, that's the place to start with. And it did that. Before that, there was no proper guide, so you would need to be a coder to have your environment set up properly. And now you have access to this, and that's perfect.
All right. So the basics, don't skip on basics and just start and break stuff quick.
Break stuff, but don't forget to make backups, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh yes.
Because with Python, you can make a big mess in no time.
All right. Thank you very much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. You shared a lot. There are too many topics I want to discuss with you, and that's probably why the podcast went in all places. Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate it for what you do with pyRevit, what you're sharing with us and community. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Eric.
Hey, before you go, real quick, I stopped the recording of this episode a little bit too quick and I didn't give Jean-Marc a proper chance to share his socials and what he's up to. I told you I'm very new to podcasting, so I'm learning on the go. So if you want to find Jean-Marc and ask him anything, you can find him on LinkedIn or pyRevit forum. And he also has a presentation coming up at Build Europe in Hague this April. I'll share the details of the presentation on the screen. I'm sure you will find it interesting. Lastly, if you enjoy what he and the team does to pyRevit, it would mean a lot if you could support them in Open Collective. Even the small amount will matter because it first of all shows that community cares about it and they would like to support the project. And thank you for watching this full episode until the end. And if you would like more, then you would love this episode with pyRevit dad, Eshan Iranejet. That was a great conversation about pyRevit and his programming journey. You wouldn't want to miss this. So, see you soon. Goodbye.